And Jodie turned to me one day and said, what would your 7-year-old self want to hear? I'd just blown up at him and I was all steamed up and I was ready for an argument, and I thought, Jodie's coming in fine. This must have been the first time I was ever in it. And instead of confronting me from a point of view of going, well, that was a bit of shit parenting, don't you think?
I was saying that inside, don't worry.
Oh, you probably were.
Yeah, but I'm very judgmental, so.
The fact you very coolly and calmly came out going, what would your 7-year-old self want to hear on that? And you just ripped down every barrier I had. And you cut right to the little 7-year-old me. And I went into the bedroom and I closed the door. I didn't have a tantrum or anything at that point in time. I sat there and I thought about the situation that I'd been in when my dad had been like that for me. My dad was a beautiful man and an amazing dad, but we all have failings.
Yeah.
And it was just in one of those things where I was like, oh my God, I was so completely powerless in that situation. This was going on in my mind, that was going on in my mind, and all of a sudden these light bulbs didn't go off. They were just smashing on my head going, you just paid that forward, and that is so not, you're not allowed to do that.
Welcome, QuantiFolks, to episode 8 of FAARK the Shoulds. And in this podcast episode, vlogcast episode, however you're consuming this, we are talking about cleaning your camera lens. And this is not going to be a step-by-step process of how to get your Nikon out.
No, we're going to cut straight to the chase, aren't we, with it, of cleaning your camera lens. And we're going to look at our camera lens is how we view the world. And we're going to look at some of the things that gunk it up and how to clean it so that we interpret and see the world for what it truly is and what it truly means to us.
Yeah. And before we get really stuck into it, I am Jodie from QuantiMama.
And I'm McGill from QuantiPapa.
Excellent.
It's only
good to be here, darling.
It's great to be here with you, darling. It's only taken us 8 episodes to work out an intro, and I guarantee we'll forget for the next one.
No doubt. That's all right. We peaked. Episode 8 was our peak. Someone take a note.
For intros, the content's still good, of course.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. So I'm really interested in where you even just started going there about talking about perception, because the point of cleaning your camera lens is talking about our perception, and it really lends back to, well, I'm sure there are many fantastic people out there that have, talked a lot about this, but one of the people that I really resonated with was Dr. Bruce Lipton, who talks about perception being the camera lens through which we view life. And I've quoted that so many times because it is such a rich way to describe it, and also a very accessible way to describe it. There was something you just said, though, when you were sort of introducing yourself about what perception means and I guess how it can gunk up the reality. I mean, we obviously know that truth is a reality for every single person in their own way, and that's theirs to interpret. But do you want to talk more about that?
Might just do a little sidebar in relation to that.
Oh, all right.
As you know, we're both from emergency services backgrounds.
Yeah.
We've let you guys know that. And we are used to going to sometimes events or things that are what some people would consider extreme. But to us, many of the things that happen in those things are second nature. So it can become quite clinical quite, make decisions quickly through the camera lens we're wearing at that point in time, whereas other people who are there or who are on the periphery are getting a vastly different reality and experience as opposed to what we are. And that is what happens to everybody in life.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if
it's a very, very illustrative situation, isn't it? The difference of having the work goggles on so you can actually go to something that's essentially a catastrophic event in someone's life. And I don't mean the people that are involved, say, in the incident, but the witnesses to that. I mean, it can stay with them for a really long time as well, and it becomes a real mark in their journey, and perhaps it leads them to make different decisions. But you're saying for those, say, emergency service workers, they have their work goggles on, so that's the camera lens through which they even view that experience and make sense of it.
It is. And, they're not superhuman, because sometimes marks are left on them as well.
Well, that's right. There's lots of PTSD in our fields.
There is a huge amount.
Yeah.
But what I was really driving towards with that is that you can all see the same thing, or you can all be involved in the same moment or snapshot in time. It's how you view that moment or snapshot that is going to shape your reality or your perception of it, and then your reality and what you take home from that. And that's something that goes on every day, 1,000,001 ways, even just in your own home, from looking at the dishes sitting on the side of the bench going, well, surely someone will have got to those.
Yeah.
No, I've been at work all day, or I've been out all day, or I didn't create them. But then we're not looking at we're not clearing away that bit of gunk to look at the bigger picture, or to see what else has gone on, or what other perceptions that have occurred to somebody else that might have, impacted why that little job, which annoys us or you or me, isn't done.
Yeah. So it's really that thing around perception seems very much tied to identity. And I know we have said we want to talk about that as well, because I think that's a really rich topic. But the identity that if you think of it as like a cloak that you're wearing at that time, I always think like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. You literally can conceal your true self in an identity cloak so that it infiltrates everything that you experience, everything that you respond to, your choice of words, your actions, and all those sort of things. And one thing that came to me as you were talking about this, and this is, super fresh, is last night I was basically annoyed with you about something. It's happened twice, and so this is now documented. He's hard to be upset with, isn't he? But one of the things that happened last night was I decided to be really just irritated at McGill, and I had a real what I would say is justified poor me mindset on what was going on. And what was really lovely was this morning I was having a walk out in nature, and gosh, sleep is a great way to help clear the camera lens. I think, spaciousness and sleep is great because you start getting out of the thinking mind that, the ego is very much wedded in. And you recharge and you replenish, and perhaps part of the gunk on that camera lens is actually fatigue and just a story that you tell yourself over and over again, which strengthens. But one of the things that also helps is being out in nature and getting some perspective. And one of the things that I said this morning on my walk with one of my dear soul sisters was that even within that moment of being really pissed with McGill, I realised that I had made decisions, within that exchange where I hadn't reached out to you in your love language. I hadn't tried any sort of repatriation efforts within those moments, and basically gone to sleep cranky, which I don't think is actually great practice in healthy relationships.
No,
and we've talked about.
It's something we've tried to avoid.
We do.
One of the best pieces of advice I was ever given, which came from my mum, was never go to sleep on a fight.
Yeah.
You don't have to resolve the issue, you don't have to resolve the argument, but never actually go to sleep on a fight.
And we weren't fighting because we don't.
No, fight. I know, but it's probably about as close as we get.
Because being annoyed at each other.
Yeah, I have no doubt. The 2 times in my entire life that I've been irritating.
Yeah.
But you just happen to witness.
I know, it's amazing.
On a recurring basis, did I say that?
Yeah.
That it's okay to be annoyed.
Yeah.
It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to feel this isn't over.
Yes.
But what's not okay is to take those negative things and let them go any further, or lose that connection.
Yes, give them more importance than they deserve.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that you do really well that I am unpracticed at, and that is that when I'm in a shit of a mood, I feel like I'm in some kind of weather pattern. Like, that's how I've described it, isn't it, in the past? I feel like I'm in a thunderstorm and I can't imagine the sun coming out. And it could be that I'm just a balls and all kind of gal. So that that tends to mean that I feel everything richly and intensely in those present moments, and I don't always remember to get some perspective about that, or perhaps be curious and look at things from a different angle. I think I'm getting better in my old age, but there's something about, I just feel like I'm in the storm in that moment, and I'm not great at finding space to look at it from a different perspective. I need a bit of time. But you have that skill, which is quite impressive. Well, I think you do. I mean, you can find ways to be equally annoyed at me in those moments.
Never.
Well, okay. Again, on the second occasion that this occurred. But you can find ways to, I think, inject some humour or try and reach out and change the dynamic of the exchange, which is, I'm curious about whether you're aware of that and what your technique is for that.
That's a huge one. Thank you, first of all, for saying all that beautiful stuff. But last night, let's go with last night. So, perfect example. Last night we were both chatting, but neither of us were clearly hearing one another. So I thought, okay.
Well, I was venting the fuck out of the situation, and you were just sitting there looking at me like I was a psych patient, correct?
And then I thought, we're talking at one another. We're not actually listening to one another. So maybe I just need to be quiet for a couple of minutes and let Jody go. And so I did. I thought,
silly him, I tell you, silly
I'm going to stop talking here.
Yeah.
I'm going to give her the spaciousness that she needs so that she can communicate what she needs. I'm going to listen, active listening. I'm actually going to listen to what she's saying. I'm going to hear what she's saying. I'm going to process what she's saying before I come back to her with an answer. I'm not going to challenge her on anything she's saying, because this is her safe space to get stuff out. And this is the problem.
Which was still the wrong thing to do.
This is the problem when you live with a high-functioning person that's onto this, exactly as Jody alluded to then. She stopped partway through the conversation and said, this is not a one-way conversation, and stop looking at me like I'm a psych patient, which is probably a reference some of you and I would get.
He had this sigh that made it sound like he was going to march me off to some involuntary institution, like he was going to have the last laugh in this. And I was like, that's not how this goes. I feel like I'm being reduced here and just pandered to.
And so actually this is
that was my perception.
This is a perfect example where we needed to clean the filter lens.
Yes.
I felt that I'd cleaned mine and was, yes, I'm clear on this. I'm going to give her space. I'm going to let her get it all out. Here I am. I'm ready to go. I'm being, husband number one.
Yeah.
And I get this really quick slap down and you're treating me like a psych patient, which is from my bottom of my heart was definitely not my intention.
I know, you thought you were doing the right thing.
But it just shows what Jody's perception was through her camera lens at that exact moment in time.
And I think that when we have the flexibility or what's the word for it, like the adaptability to actually change in a given moment, to be aware that perhaps your camera lens has become a little bit, tainted or a little bit dirty, or
even to use the analogy of the ability to zoom out from that conversation for just that fraction of time to look at an overall picture.
Yeah. Taking the binoculars off.
Yeah, or just zooming back from it, going, hang on a minute, what's really the issue here? Because so many times we interact with people, and people that trigger emotions in us, and we respond in a way that we generally either don't want to or isn't our true self. So the question is, how do we get to that point where we have a little bit of presence and can react into, or not react, and can put out there what we're actually talking about instead of hiding behind a wall or not saying what our true heart feels and what we need in that moment.
Yeah.
Because that's the sort of stuff that has a potential to lead to, ongoing stresses within especially a close relationship, but friendships and partnerships and everything.
I mean, but this camera lens through which you're looking, even if you have like verbal transgressions or anything like that, the radical self-responsibility still kicks in, doesn't it? I mean, the radical self-responsibility and the power of words, they're just all so tied into each other. But one of the things that I think that the power of perception and this, looking at your camera lens and being diligent to actually look at situations where you're feeling an emotional response and you feel it in your body. That radical self-responsibility step is to say, okay, well, what's my camera lens doing? You know, do I need to, you know, get the cleaner out and give it a bit of a Windex and you know, clear the vision? Because I wonder if people have a whole lot of undesirable experiences that could be mitigated if they just looked at the perception they were viewing the situation with. And one of the things that comes up a lot for us, which has so much wisdom and power to change your experience, is coming from a place of curiosity. Such a rich word, isn't it?
And it's funny because that's something that we sort of come across and we've tried to institute with our children, first of all.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's easier than looking in that mirror of yourself at that point in
absolutely.
time. But you know what? This will be great for the kids, darling. Let's try this one.
It.
And we think
do as I say, not as I do.
We're doing this amazing, groundbreaking thing, which is exactly as that. You know, if one of our children is having a tantrum and moving some energy, we try to not look at it as, oh God, they're having a tantrum.
Yeah.
We try to hit that curiosity, and it's a little bit of what I was talking about, finding out what the true problem is.
Yes.
Hit that curiosity point. So go, you know what? You need to move this energy. Keep moving it. As you're letting bits and pieces out, or as you're coming back into communicating a bit better, I've got to look for the clues or the cues of what the real underlying issue is here, because I'm curious. And then I'm curious when I find those things to whether we can work towards, you know, changing your perception or your camera lens in relation to what's going on for you. And you're not being met with that, in this case, an overbearing father or a frustrated father, or you're not being met with negativity.
Yes.
You're being met with a bit of curiosity. And then
noticing where society has almost been programming you for those perceptions as well. I don't know if you were going to go there, but as you were talking, the thing that occurred to me was these overarching languages, say, particularly I was thinking around kids and what you were saying just there, you know. You think about how many times you've heard people talk about their children or other people's kids and say, oh, you know, little Johnny's just testing me, or little Johnny's, you know, spoilt and just looking for attention. And look, maybe that's true, but really, say 5-year-old doesn't have that kind of capacity and clarity to be intentional in that way. And then they may have learned that behaviour. But
so the curiosity there should be, why does poor little Johnny cops a flogging?
Yes.
But why does little Johnny want my attention?
That's right.
And this is one of the ones we sort of worked out over time, and lots of people I'm sure have said it to us in the past, is children often don't care whether they're getting negative attention or positive attention, as long as they're getting your attention.
Yeah.
And
they're just looking for connection.
And if they can trigger it a certain way, then they trigger it that way. I mean, watch fathers and daughters.
Yeah.
When daughters want their dad's attention, quite often there's touch and a hug or a vulnerability that's sort of put out there to evoke that response from a father of, oh yes, come here, my little darling, let me hold you and cuddle you. Whereas often for fathers and sons, there's a lot more of a bluff and bravado screen that goes up when we should be reaching out to give that hug.
Yeah, well, everyone's human. They all have those needs.
They are, and we're also going. There was something, I had a bit of a discussion today with beautiful Cheryl, who's a friend of ours, and love her to bits. But she just threw out there that most of the time, in fact, pretty much all the time, when we react negatively to something, it's an emotion that we have tracked, or it's an emotional experience that we've had, and something gets triggered. And we've spoken about triggers before.
Yeah.
And this trigger is what has set you off.
Yeah.
And the question is not so much what the person has said, it's what happened all that time ago when you've got this trigger implanted in you, or this programming planted in you that wants you to react a prescribed way.
Or is reflected around society. And so there's this tsunami of energy around a belief system. And so a whole lot of people have that camera lens sort of going, don't they? So how do we how do we find ways to bring that to our attention? Because obviously we understand that the conscious mind is concentrating on, I never remember the amount, it's some minuscule amount, 40 bits of information per second. And the subconscious mind is paying attention to something like 40 million bits of information per second. So I can say in this now moment, okay, I've got radical self-responsibility, and then what happens is I get annoyed at something because
so something throws that mirror up in front of you and suddenly you've got to look at yourself.
Well, I got my dirty goggles on, and not dirty in a good way, but dirty in an unhelpful way. So my dirty goggles on that are skewing my perception, affecting my camera lens through which I'm experiencing my life. And I go into an emotional response. All the blood and the energy goes to the hindbrain because now I'm in some kind of defensive fight-flight mode. So I'm into a sympathetic nervous system response. And the frontal cortex of my brain has totally buggered off and gone on, long lunch break. And the radical self-responsibility intention gone. Yeah.
And
so what are the techniques? Obviously, we've talked about sleep, but you can't really do that during the day. So what does sleep facilitate, and how else can we do that?
So sleep would, if we break it down a little bit, so sleep allows a break.
Yeah.
And allows a break in the cycle at that point in time. So if you're right there in that moment and you've just, everything's flying out the window and you're back into that hind brain, you need a break.
And you can feel it in your heart. It just feels shitful, doesn't it?
But the problem is you feel shitful, but the words are coming out and you're going, I don't want to say this. And out it comes. And the more it comes, the more damage is done.
I've been that person many times.
But you don't want to do it. And the person's hearing it knows that's not what you want to say.
No.
But at that
it is like tumbleweed going down a cliff face, though, isn't it? You can just feel the momentum. Yeah.
When it gets going. And often when we get to the end of it, we feel worse than we did.
Well, no one's done well in that situation, do they?
So,
so a circuit breaker of some description, or a change of environment?
Whichever you can.
Yeah.
Because if you're having a conversation where you really need to be there and have that conversation. So one that I use with the kids is one you gave me, which is...
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. She's far more advanced than what she lets you know. Was in relation to Quanti number 3, who is more than my mirror. And from when he was probably 3 years old, he would trigger me at every point. And it wasn't him doing anything. It was me seeing myself. And
little McGill.
As he grew, the inner child was in. And we all have an inner child that at some point in time needs nourishing and is going to be shaping how we're going forward.
And acceptance usually as well.
So this went on for a couple of years where I could see a pattern repeating, now that I look back at it, between probably my father and I could see it being repeated between myself and my son. And Jody turned to me one day and said, what would your 7-year-old self want to hear? I'd just blown up at him. And I was all steamed up and I was ready for an argument, and I thought, Jody's coming in fine. This must have been the first time I was ever annoyed. And instead of confronting me from a point of view of going, well, that was a bit of shit parenting, don't you think?
I was saying that inside, don't worry.
Oh, you probably were.
Yeah, but I'm very judgmental, so.
The fact you very coolly and calmly came out going, what would your 7-year-old self want to hear on that? And you just ripped down every barrier I had. And you cut right to the little 7-year-old me. And I went into the bedroom and I closed the door. I didn't have a tantrum or anything at that point in time. I sat there and I thought about the situation that I'd been in when my dad had been like that for me. My dad was a beautiful man and an amazing dad, but we all have failings.
Yeah.
And it was just in one of those things where I was like, oh my God, I was so completely powerless in that situation. This was going on in my mind, that was going on in my mind, and all of a sudden these light bulbs didn't go off. They were just smashing on my head going, you just paid that forward, and that is so not, you're not allowed to do that. It's your job to do more. So once.
We just don't want to be those people.
No, we don't.
Of
But we
course.
can change that cycle within a generation.
Yes.
So I remember.
I've witnessed that.
Yes, you have. You had a front row seat.
You have been doing that.
So for the last, 3.5 years since that conversation sort of taken place, I would say that I've mended the relationship or changed the relationship with my son, changed the viewing platform of him.
Yes.
But what I've really done when you get down to the heart of it is I've looked at my inner child and I've looked at myself and I've gone, you know what? What would I need to hear in that situation? And that's something that I take into any challenging conversation I have with people now. If someone's unloading to me, or about someone else, I have that a bit. That's probably where I get this ability to step out. And this is well practiced. This is 3.5 years of practice.
Yeah.
I have that ability to look at it and go, you know what? What's the real message here? What do you need to hear? What are the things you're pushing past boundaries that I don't cross, so I'm going to pull you up on that because I have to stay true to myself. And how can I give you the support so that you can keep looking into the mirror?
Yes.
And you can keep this flow going so you're back talking, realize that you're back talking to yourself. Is that what you're after? Because that's a lot of chatting.
I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
I loved it. It was beautiful. Well, I mean, I'm inspired to actually do that with one of my children. I mean, our children.
That's right. Hang on a minute.
Oh, there's something else I need to tell you.
Yeah, right.
No, I am inspired by that because I think that may have been a moment of genius that I, channeled and passed on to you, but I don't think I've actually embodied it very well. And there is something unique about our children that can really just hit those nerves in a way that other people don't. We afford them, far less generosity than we probably do our friends. And we did the same thing with our partners as well, our long-term, husbands and wives, where we don't afford that generosity either. So that empathetic camera lens can be so rich, can't it? It really just can change the entire dynamic and flow and outcome of any kind of exchange.
So anything you can do,
I can do better. No.
Well, we can always do better, right?
Yes.
But we can all do well.
Yes.
When we want to clear that camera lens and we want to clean it off, get out the Windex, give it a good scrub, clean it up so it's nice and clean. When we're going to do that, it's that ability to suddenly take judgment, take all those outside pressing things out of the equation and go, you know what? I'm here, I'm present, and I'm just going to let this happen. And then we start to kick into those other skills that we need to have. And we go, okay, well, where's my radical self-responsibility in this? Where's my holding space within this? Where's my confronting my own triggers within this? And where's my way to put a positive outcome on this and a positive spin? I mean, and we've gone to it a bit, and Gus is, QK3 is amazing.
Yeah.
But the relationship I have with him now is great.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I never ever got that with my dad until I was probably almost in my 40s.
You're an early bloomer, babes.
But it took that long for me to be able to come back and to have those conversations to a point, but also to examine a lot of the things that occurred for me.
Yeah.
And go back to that time and space. What does your 7-year-old self want? Well, put yourself back there and remember the situations and, give that put your hand on the shoulder of that little 7-year-old kid when you're there and say, hey, that's what you're going to turn into, kiddo. You're going to be all right.
Yeah.
I got your back.
It's a very powerful image.
It is an amazingly powerful image. And, the other thing I want to say on that is it's okay. In fact, I really encourage it to admit when you're wrong, to admit when you've overreacted, to say, I'm sorry, and then explain why. Because this is part of taking that radical self-responsibility to another level. And when your children and your partner and your friends and family hear that genuineness in you that says, you know what, I've looked at that and I was a bit of an ass, or I was on the wrong track, but I just couldn't stop that verbal diarrhea that was coming out. So here I am, I'm laying it there, I'm apologising. And what you find after a period of time is you go, you know what, before you get to that point, when that avalanche is starting to come down the hill, you throw in that circuit breaker, or you mentally go, okay, I'm just going to clean this off. I'm going to clean this camera lens off. I'm going to go, right, what's my real issue here? And seeing if you can then move into the observer role.
Yeah.
Which is another good one to throw in. We'll come back to that in just a sec. Step into that observer role in the situation and take the emotion out of it to a point.
Yes.
And say, I'm going to hear, I'm going to see, and then I'm going to choose. I'm going to take power in this. And I don't mean power in a negative way. I don't mean power in I'm going to take charge of it. No, I'm going to take power in how I act and what I'm gifting. And you should always come from a place of pure love. So you should always be gifting from your heart.
Should you? Should you?
Yes, thank you. You will. Yes. Because that is what is going to change the world.
I think so. And I think that I know for me, my emotions are very strong. So I would find it very challenging to put the emotions aside. But there is a wisdom in just popping them down on the bus bench seat, you know, at the bus stop, and say, look, just wait here, I'll be back for you soon. And then see if you can actually change your perception in that moment, just to create some kind of kink. And emotions are energy in motion. So naturally, when we change the flow of our energy and our perception and where we place our attention, we naturally create a different emotion in that moment. What I want to round out with this conversation, because it has been lovely, so thank you. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, because it really, you know, I get a lot out of it too.
So what?
Yeah, I know, but I'm very appreciative of it. So if we circle back to our raging domestic last night, I know there are two things that would have been another way to clean the camera lens last night that would have been useful for us, that wasn't sleep. But I'm curious, what comes to mind when I say, what do you think could have changed that experience for us, or cleaned our camera lenses?
Maybe we could have acknowledged we both had things we wanted to say.
Yeah.
And differing things and things we wanted to get off our chest, and said, okay, let's do, you know, another powerful exercise.
Talking stick.
Kids, effectively a talking stick. Or going, you know what, you got 2 minutes, you don't have to start a timer, but 2 minutes, off you go. And the person just is allowed to talk, let it out, let it all out. And then at the end, it's not your job to reply to what they've said.
Yeah.
It's then your turn to say what you were feeling. And if you can both hold that space for one another and then get to the end of it and then go, now we'll have our discussion in relation to what's actually important and what's not.
Yes.
Because there's a feeling of honouring, there's a feeling of space being held, and there's that circuit breaker because you go from wanting to be going backwards and forwards to suddenly going, no, this is your time.
Yes.
And this is my time. So talking stick might have worked, but I'm a bit worried that those emotions, that are energy emotion, might have led to the talking stick.
They may have done
it once or twice last
especially
night.
When you gave me those sighs.
I tried something.
Oh my God, that sigh. So there were two things that came to me, and you know, we can visit the alternate reality where it played out and try these out as well.
Or we can put them in, have them in the background for the third time if we ever get frustrated.
Exactly. Yeah. Pack them in the bag for next time. So the two things that I had come up with that I was aware that I absolutely was instrumental in withholding or making a decision to not honour was, the first thing was that you you did an attempt at humour, and I was really grateful for that too in hindsight, because it meant that McGill wasn't getting as cranky with me as I was with him. It was definitely like more flow from my direction. And if I had just laughed in that moment, you know, just given a little bit of ground, that would have really changed the experience, because it does. Like when you move extra energy, it tends to shift and shake up the situation, doesn't it? And clean your perception a bit in that moment.
Is this your way of telling me I'm not funny enough?
No, I'm saying I was not generous enough in that moment.
Right, so there's no comedy gold coming from my side of the room.
I was not comedy gold. Nothing was comedy gold last night.
So nothing, yeah, okay, that's right.
Yeah, just so you know, yeah. So, and the other thing that I thought was, and I know that this works for you, but if I had have just put a hand on you, because, you know, coming back to love languages, your strongest receiving love language is one of touch. It's also your giving love language. But McGill's receiving love language is touch, and it's very effective. Like I can literally put a hand on him somewhere in his big muscles or his heart, and you stop, and then you melt. You're like ice cream in the sun. It does work, but
that's
I was
a circuit breaker for me.
If you touch right now, you get none of it. You're just getting cranky Jojo.
And cranky Jojo needed to vent.
You know, after all, it would have been nicer to finish with touch and a laugh.
It would have been, but
next time.
So, all right, we might have to orchestrate an argument this evening.
Stay tuned. You can see where this is going.
There was something else you said in there about.
Are we still talking about this?
I just want to say this because I want to honour something that you said.
Absolutely. If you're honouring me, you may have the mic. You
basically said about there that you're an emotional being, my darling, and you certainly are. And that's 1000% of your light that just drew me in from the start. And it just keeps me like that little moth just buzzing back towards that flame, because yes, you are emotional. Yes, you wear them on your sleeve. You're a heart on the sleeve girl. You put yourself out there. Balls and all's the one you use.
Yes.
I'd say that you lead with your heart.
Thank you.
And while we can look at that sometimes and go, you know what, we need to moderate that, we need to change that, or we need to look at the filters or clean the lens, from an absolutely pure love point of view, that's where it all began.
Oh, thank you. Oh, he's so cute. Thanks, darling.
It had to be said.
Nice thing to say. Yeah. All right, that completes his conversation. We're going to wrap up this one with touch. Are we not?
We are. And reconnection.
The best bit about a tiff. Stay tuned for our next conversation. Who knows when it'll be? Who knows what it'll be about? But it'll be delightful.
Well, that was absolutely not what I was thinking we were talking about tonight, and I'm so glad we did.
Me too. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again.
See you guys. Bye.